Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. So, Season 2, Episodes 5 and 6 of Forces of Destiny, we are going to dispense with Run, Ray, Run really quickly. That's Episode 5, because there's not much to it. It's good for what it is. And that is that Rey is inside a Star Destroyer trying to salvage some parts, finds one that can't easily be salvaged without shaking the whole superstructure of the ship, which seems crazy, but there it is. And then Teedo shows up and he's pointing a gun at her and wants her to give up all the gear she's salvaged, and so she has to at gunpoint. He decides that he's going to try and get this part that she was like, no, don't do it, and he pulls it out anyway. And then of course everything collapses, traps Teedo, and so Rey is like, oh, really, I have to do this. And so she grabs Teedo out from under the thing that fell on him, and she has to carry him bodily, racing out of the Star Destroyer before it all collapses on her. And so they manage to get out safely, and the Teedo tries to take the bag away, and Rey has to say, I just saved your life. And so Teedo gives the bag of salvage over to Rey, and he's grumbling the whole time. So as she's getting back on her speeder and taking off, you're just hearing Teedo griping and moaning about it, which was actually rather funny, I thought. And so that is Run, Ray, Run. Try and say that 5 times fast. But episode 6 is Bounty Hunted, and this is the one that is probably one of the most momentous episodes in season 2 of Forces of Destiny for the event that it depicts. So here is the deal with it. You have to watch this episode. If there's only one episode of Forces of Destiny that you watch from season 2, it must be Bounty Hunted. So Leia, Chewie, and R2-D2 are together, and this takes place in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And they're looking for Maz Kanata, who they find. And Maz tells Leia that Han has actually told her a lot about her. So that in itself is very interesting, because the only way that could have happened was in between Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. So sometime in that 3 years, Han apparently had occasion to be with Maz Kanata, and without Leia, presumably, because otherwise how would he be talking to her about Leia? He wouldn't have done it in front of Leia, to be sure. And the whole thing in The Force Awakens about Chewie being Maz's boyfriend, well, you don't necessarily know from the movie whether Chewie is okay with that or not, but you find out in this episode that he loves Maz, and they have a huge big hug. She's like, oh, my boyfriend, and he's very happy to see her and gives her a great big hug. So that establishes completely the relationship between Maz and Chewie. And the thrust of the episode is that Leia and Chewie and R2 have come to Maz for assistance with their predicament, with Han being in Carbonite and having been sold to Jabba the Hutt. And while they are there on Ord Mantell, again, Ord Mantell is showing up in Forces of Destiny, the bounty hunter Boushh, the real bounty hunter Boushh, happens to show up and start shooting at Leia and Chewie and R2 and Maz Kanata. So Maz is like, a solution presents itself, basically, and they manage to subdue Boushh. And Maz says, this is interesting. His uniform looks about your size. And when Boushh is defeated, he tries to just say, well, heck with this, I'm taking everybody out. Flips open a thermal detonator, but Maz gets a stun prod and zaps Boushh, and they're able to disarm the thermal detonator. And Leia's like, oh, this could come in handy. So there's your thermal detonator that she pulls out in Return of the Jedi. To say nothing of the actual bounty hunter uniform itself, which Leia is wearing sans helmet at the end of the episode. And they're in the Millennium Falcon, by the way. And so Lando must already be entrenched in Jabba's palace by this point. And so Leia and Chewie and R2 are flying the Falcon around. And it does sort of raise the question, is this happening immediately before they go to Jabba's palace and bring Chewbacca in as a prisoner? Or is this just something that, while Leia's trying on the uniform and she's still wearing it, and she's going to show up wherever Luke is and say, ta-da, I got a bounty hunter uniform and I'm going to impersonate a bounty hunter. What do you think of this idea? And Luke goes, that's perfect. That fits in with this crazy mousetrap plan that I've got. That in itself is really funny to think about. And as they're leaving, Maz says to Chewie, tell Han she's a keeper, referring to Leia. And so, of course, what does Maz know about Han's previous relationships? That's what I would like to know, too. And it's also a very positive thing. Maz obviously assumes that Han's going to get out of Carbonite and be just fine. I mean, yes, we all know that's the case. So, I guess you could suggest the possibility that maybe they should have had Maz say something different because Maz doesn't know how this is all going to shake out. But then again, Maz, might be a little bit force connected, so she might have an idea about how things could turn out for the best after all. And one other thing, well, kind of two other things to note about Bounty Hunted. I'm going to throw up a screenshot here. And if you look at the rabbity looking character on the left hand side of the frame, well, that resembles, but it hasn't been confirmed as being Jackson, the green haired rabbit of fame from all the way back in Star Wars 8, the original Marvel comic series way back in the 70s, where he debuted. And the character on the right with the little red mark over his left eye, well, that character as appearing here strongly resembles what the character Score, Skorr, looked like in the old Legends expanded universe. And that's significant because Score is the bounty hunter that Han Solo had run into on Ord Mantell that he referred to in The Empire Strikes Back. At this point in time, we do not know for sure whether they are, in fact, Jackson and Score, but it's a very cool little nod to the expanded universe / Legends nonetheless. And that is going to do it for today's episode. Over on the audio version of the podcast, I'm going to do Last Jedi Trivia, so do check that out, sw7x7.com/iTunes, or wherever you'd like to listen to podcasts. But for now, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.